Welcome to For the Long Run, the podcast exploring the why behind what keeps runners running long, strong, and motivated. I'm your host, Jonathan Levitt. I've been running for a few years now and have the privilege of meeting many incredible runners on my travels all across the country. This podcast is intended to share those amazing conversations. This week's guest is Chris Mocko. Chris is a trail runner, ultramarathoner, and long-distance specialist currently training for the Western States 100-miler at the end of June. We talked about what excites him about the 100-mile distance, as he feels he's figured out the road marathon, but still is pretty uncertain about the hundreds, which he finds to be a fun challenge to try and figure out. We talked about Mocko's experience as a full-time athlete, as he's quit his job twice now. He talked about balance, as well as his YouTube channel and general social media presence. Chris opened up a bit about vulnerability and the shared struggle of things not going well all the time, as well as what scares him. Chris runs for Nike and hopefully one day Kodiak Cakes. Enjoy. Welcome back. I am here in Boulder, Colorado with Chris Mocko. So Chris, thanks for joining in today.
Yeah, I'm loving the business center office. Pretty sweet digs here in the Millennium Hotel.
Yeah, it's not bad. They hooked it up here. Just kidding. Yeah, it's the fun thing about business rooms in hotels that, it's 2019, so nobody uses them. So it's a pretty reliable spot for
there's
podcasting.
Windows 95 operating on these computers.
Yeah, and it's like an arcade game, and you have to put in $1, $5, $10, or $20 to get internet time.
We're just trying to set the mood for all our listeners. We're sitting intimately inside of a business center that you have to pay by minute in order to use with cash, not card. And
they take card.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah. I mean, this isn't like 1920.
And fortunately, it is not rush hour. 1 p.m. on a weekday is typically not rush hour for a hotel. But I believe you were looking for an introduction for me of who I am.
Yes, who is Chris Mocko and why is he sitting in his business room?
We kind of jumped in here. My name is Chris Mocko. I reside in Boulder, Colorado, hence the interview today in Boulder. And I'm a 33-year-old trail runner, ultramarathoner, long-distance specialist. I run for Nike, and I am currently training for the Western States Endurance Run, 100-miler at the end of June.
And is your big goal at Western States still the 9 p.m. Applebee's dinner?
Despite several efforts to get a sponsorship with Applebee's, it did not go as planned. They did offer a discount once, I think, and they also have like $1 margaritas. So
sometimes.
It's a pretty good deal regardless. It's hard to get much discounted. The margins are probably pretty thin as is. So, I think if I have a good race and finish at that time, which I believe means sub 16 hours, which would be pretty stout, especially if it's going to be a snow year, I'll probably treat myself to something a little bit nicer than that.
Cool. Well, let's dive right into it. So 100 miles, what do you like about that distance?
What do I like about 100 miles? I actually just wrote this down this morning, not preparing for this, a separate question. I believe at this point in my career, I've probably run over 20, close to 30 road marathons. And I think at this point I've figured out the training I need to do and how to mentally get through the race itself. The last 4 or 5 marathons have gone incredibly well. I think
You've won a few of them?
I've won all of them. I mean, they're not Boston marathons, but the Cheyenne Marathon is right behind Boston when it comes to prestige.
It's like 1 and 1A.
Yeah. But I think I figured out how to mentally attack that race.
So how do you do that?
I train hard.
Get uncomfortable.
I put in the mileage. I put in some very hard workouts, and I know what those workouts should be. It should be long tempo runs. It should be faster, higher intensity intervals. And I've done that by myself. I've done that with the help of several different coaches. And typically, I think the accountability and the structure that a coach can provide has allowed me to be more successful. But at the end of the day, you show up to the race and you need to stare all the other competitors on the line down and know that it's going to hurt for everyone, and you need to just gut it out and hope you come out on top. And I've been very blessed that I have gotten through the low points in the race. I think with a marathon, you don't expect to hurt until you get to like mile 15. And I found every single time there's a pivotal moment at mile 3, at 6, at 9, at 14, and you have to win all those battles, because especially that early in the race, you're not actually tired. It's just your head telling you, oh my gosh, I have so much more to go.
Did you break it up?
No, I just anticipate that those moments are going to come and do whatever it takes to get me through those. I think the best tactic that I've tricked myself with is just convincing myself to get to the next aid station or the next mile mark instead of worrying about the finish. So at mile 16, I might feel like I'm dead, but then I just tell myself, okay, get to mile 18. This will be a great long run, if anything else. And then we'll reevaluate there. And then at a certain point, kind of instincts kick in. You start smelling that finish line, and I kind of switch gears. And as soon as I get to that point, then I know I'm good for the rest of the day.
Cool. So that's a marathon. But
Yes.
What do you like about the 100?
Yeah, so marathon. Feel like I figured that one out. I think I can still run a little bit faster, but I need to have the right training and then find the correct race in order to do that. Unfortunately, road marathons don't pay the bills for me. I am a trail marathon specialist. I'm very well aware that my marathon times, while pretty good, are certainly not elite level. And the exciting thing about these longer distances is that there's an opportunity to be one of the best. And I don't know if that's because not enough people have discovered it yet, or I have skills that allow me to perform better at those things. But I found that anything on trails is not only more interesting from a training perspective, just getting off of roads and on trails where you just lose track of time, but the races themselves, I feel like there's an opportunity to be competitive at a global level. Have I gotten there yet? I don't think so, and that's part of the fun of it. I know I have a lot of work to do, and I have weaknesses, and as much as I hate hills, I got to focus on climbing and getting in vert. I'm still a road runner at heart, so I chase the miles and try to go for miles. I'm like, well, it's faster to go flat than it is to go up a mountain, but it's really important to get in those miles. And especially when there's snow out there and mud, I tend to avoid anything on the trails, but I just need to man up, toughen up a little bit and get out there. But with the 100-miler, I just have yet to figure it out. And I had one pretty successful go at it in my debut. And that's probably out of just blind luck and being a little ignorant of the distance and what it would take. But the next two have not gone super well. I had to drop out of one. I had to walk the last 35 miles at Western States. And then there were 2 or 3 other races that I didn't even start. I withdrew before I even got to the starting line. So not only is it about figuring out during the race, but also figuring out my training leading up to it and not getting overwhelmed by this fear of having to race a 100-miler at some point.
So how do you manage the training in a place like Boulder where like there's something epic to do every day? And how do you balance structure and training with a long-term focus?
I would not recommend my training approach for most individuals. Right now I am very tired, and I've intentionally, knowing myself and knowing that at the level that I like to train at, I was very intentional about the way I was going to approach this training block. I've found time and time again that I'm typically, if the typical training program is 12 weeks long, around week 8, I'm probably the fittest. And I have my best race then. And then the last month, it kind of falls apart. And it has nothing to do with the taper, but much more to do with just the time focused on one training block. And so for this training, I raced a key marathon at the end of March. One approach could have been to jump immediately into trails. I actually was signed up for 250-milers in April. I kind of did a double take on whether that made sense, stepped back for a moment, realized maybe not the smartest approach, shied away from any workouts, shied away from high mileage, really allowed my body to recover and regroup. Probably put on a little more weight than I would have wanted in a very brief off season. But I needed that reset. And now I'm just starting to build back up and have had a couple of really quality weeks. Last week I ran about 150 miles. This week, probably somewhere in the 130 to 140 range. I'll have one more high intensity week, and then I'll start to taper down a little bit. And will it work? I don't know. I did a similarly high intense volume leading up to the Western States in 2017. I maybe had too many races close to right before the race, had a couple life events get in the way, but all of those stresses combined, I didn't really taper, but I just kind of fell apart in the last month. And while I was still incredibly fit when I got to the start line, I just didn't have the confidence that I'm hoping I will have at this point. Right now, if I had to race Western States, I'd be very scared because I know I'm not at 100% yet. I'm not at 90%. I just did a workout this morning that 2 months ago would have been easy for me. I got dropped in the first 30 seconds. I didn't even make it a minute with a buddy of mine. So it's a little
But he
tough.
was on a bike, right?
Yeah. He was on a motorcycle. So it's a little tough to be at a place we're 4.5 weeks away from race day and not feel like I'm ready to go, but I'm not rushing it. I know that every week has gone better than the previous, and I know that if I can stay patient and remain confident that I'm heading in the right direction, that good things will happen on race day. And I might not be sharp and right at 100%, but I think many other people have mentioned this on other podcast articles. Being at 90% and feeling like you're heading to 95 is a lot better than being at 95 and heading to 90. So that momentum, I think, is going to be the most important.
Cool. Well, we had tens of millions of people write in with questions, so let's get to those. How has your approach changed as you navigate between having a full-time job and being a full-time athlete? I think a lot of people are curious about how you've managed that and what you're able to do now versus what you were doing when you had more obligations in the day.
Yeah, full-time employment and running can work very well together. It provides a lot of structure, and if you are disciplined, there's an opportunity to execute really well. I don't think it's feasible to get anywhere close to the volume that I'm doing. And another hard element is that you're kind of stuck running on the edges of the day. During the winter, it's almost certainly going to be dark. During the summer, sometimes hard to get out for that like 6 p.m. run when it's still 80 degrees out and you've been snacking on M&Ms and who knows what else fancy stuff you have at your office. So with the right discipline, it can be accomplished. I feel like running 140 miles without a job and running even 100 with a job is almost equal stress levels, if the job almost probably more, because I do have time to rest. I nap often. And when I do get into a hole and I miss a couple days of sleep, we mentioned I had a crazy baptism this weekend, headed down to Los Angeles for my godson's baptism. And yeah, obviously don't get a lot of sleep during a baptism weekend. And
it sounds crazy.
Yeah, it was a wild time in Malibu. But if I had to return to a job, I almost certainly would have had to take 1, if not 2 days off from running just to get a little extra sleep. But I was able to sleep in, get in my runs still, and that's just an advantage that you can have when you're not working full time. I feel like the stress management component of it is just a lot easier to manage when you have all day. That being said, you're sitting around idle. It's easy to make bad decisions. You're close to a kitchen. It's easy to grab a second lunch, but I'm also in the same regards when you're at an office, especially one that caters food, you have like very massive meals when it's like, do I really need like prime rib at lunch today? Like it's probably not what is required.
It's going to sit a little heavy for the second run.
Yeah. So I think having more control over your day and schedule can be an advantage, but you need to be equally disciplined to actually get the stuff done, wake up and knock out your runs. Because if you wait till noon to do your first run of the day, there might not be time for a second run. And as easy as it sounds to wake up and be like, oh, well then you'll have all day to sleep and drink coffee and do all that. It's pretty tough to will yourself out of the bed when you really don't have that much going on during the day. A 1 p.m. podcast gives you a lot of time to procrastinate in the morning.
For sure. What was it like making the jump from full-time to supporting yourself through running?
Well, this is my second go at it. It's round 2. I attempted
It's not your first rodeo, as they say.
Not my first rodeo. My first attempt was in 2017. It lasted about 6 months, basically leading up to Western States, and then a month or two of just finding myself in the woods of Marin, a lot of walking and solo time. And the race was very disappointing. That certainly didn't help. But the big thing for me was that I was 100% committed to running, and that training was my primary focus. And when you're running twice a day, every day for 2 to 3 hours, and you have stretching and core and everything else, your days go by pretty quickly. But as soon as that high intensity working out is eliminated, you suddenly have a ton of free time. You're like, what am I supposed to be doing with my day? And that happened after Western States. Had a lot of doubts about what I was doing and if this was the right path for me and if I was utilizing my skill set to the best of my abilities. Decided to move to Boulder, get another job. That lasted only a year because I had tasted the good life and had realized how great it was to be able to train full time. And now I'm in the second go of it. And I think the main difference is I've tried to add more structure. So I'm a little bit better about getting out and getting my first run out of the way because I'm always more clear-minded and focused and efficient with my time once I've gotten one run out of the way. And I've also tried to diversify a little bit. Now, almost everything else I'm doing is related to running, but I am spending a little bit of time with my YouTube channel, The Mocko Show, youtube.com/The Mocko Show. I spend a little bit of time coaching and really investing a good amount of time with just a handful of athletes. And then a couple of side projects as well, and keeping myself busy with things that stimulate me and also make me feel like I've accomplished something that during the day makes a big difference. Finishing your runs is an awesome feeling, but feeling like you filled in the rest of the hours with something productive and not just watching Netflix, which I can't do because I'm afraid of what will happen if I pay for a Netflix subscription. It certainly brings a lot more roundness to life.
Definitely. Let's talk about the YouTube channel and your social media presence. It seems like you're very intentional with how you communicate with your audience. What's your goal on social media? Or what's your let's start with the YouTube channel. Mm-hmm. Do you want to I'm sure you have, tons of listeners, or viewers, but maybe let's share with this audience a little bit more about the channel.
Yeah, the YouTube channel started as an experiment in 2017. I was challenged to write down every single hour of the day, kind of diary style, for a week period to be posted on a website. It was like, follow an elite athlete, mm-hmm. see what they're doing. And I decided to accompany that blog with some videos for the week. Didn't put very much effort into editing or quality of video content. Got a lot of grief for not filming in landscape mode and all these like YouTube 101 stuff that everyone knows. Everyone in the vlogosphere knows. And I didn't really know what to make of it, but I saw that I got to about 1,000 views per video. That was pretty cool. Obviously, a huge percentage of that was coming from friends and family who followed me on other social platforms and were just being nice because I was blasting these links all over the place.
Hey, Mom, read this.
Yeah.
Watch this.
Yeah, so most of the views are still my mom and dad. But I've found over time that I've been able to connect with a community of runners, a very niche community of runners who are equally geeked out on the sport and love it. And it's a really amazing opportunity to share updates and connect with them. And people talk about brand and building a presence online so that you can then sell products, but it's not about that. It's about presenting an authentic, mostly authentic version of myself, sometimes a little bit more hyped up and extroverted than I am typically, but the hope is just to be able to share a little bit of my journey and the struggles. So I think YouTube is an easier channel to share ups and downs than, Instagram. Nobody wants to see an ugly Instagram photo, and then people complain, oh, nobody never shares bad updates on Instagram. It's like, yeah,
nobody sees them.
Nobody wants to see cloudy flat irons where you can't actually see the flat
Yeah.
irons. And YouTube, I think you can share in more detail. You have a conversation with folks. People can leave comments, and it's been a great opportunity. So now where I show up to races, people are shouting "C Money" all over the place, and C Money is just a random name I started calling myself because talking in third person is a very bizarre thing that you do when you're uncomfortably filming yourself. And I was like, oh, I'm going to go by this fake moniker, and it's caught on. And now people are shouting it at races, and it's very cool because Western States 2016, I thought I was a pretty good runner, but there was not a single person cheering for me. And I specifically remember running by this section where SFRC, San Francisco Running Company, had put up some signs, and I was a San Francisco runner. And I was so bummed that there wasn't a sign for me. And for good reason, I don't think I ever actually started a run from their store. So I can't be blamed too much for that. But it's very awesome that while I wasn't able to connect with my community that was literally, a quarter mile from my door for 6 months, I was able to connect. I am able to connect with this bigger audience. And sure, it probably has some value to brands as well, but that's certainly not the intent. And all of the goals that I've associated with growing that audience and viewership is all personal drive to just see how big we can get it. I think the hardest thing for any YouTube channel is you spend a lot of time on these videos, and you spend a lot of time on these podcasts, and until you hit some inflection point, the amount of views and the audience you're reaching isn't that large, and it has to be organic, I think, unless you do something crazy viral. And I'm not planning to go streaking or do one of these horrible things that some of these YouTube stars have done to get attention. And as a result, I'm going to probably be on this slow path for a bit, and it's a grind. I talk about pancakes all the time, and I have a fondness for Kodiak Cakes. And I was listening to a talk the CEO was giving about a couple months ago, and I did not realize that he has been working on the Kodiak Cakes brand for 23 years. And when you think about the recent success, it's like, oh, it was a no-brainer that they were going to get here. But clearly, there was a lot of time invested before it went big. And similarly, I can't be frustrated when I'm like, oh man, I only grew 2% this month when I wanted to grow 10%, and why aren't subscribers higher? And I know that, consistency and continuing to put out content, which I've failed to do time and time again, is really the best way to do that. But if it doesn't grow, I know that I've already connected with a great set of folks, and having their support and love is pretty awesome.
Yeah, and I think that's a good comparison to fitness also. Like, you're not insanely fit in a month. You don't get insanely fit in a month. You have to lay the bricks, you have to lay the groundwork, and over time things happen. And I think that a lot of people are chasing these short-term achievements that are totally unrealistic. It's great to set lofty goals, but you have to be somewhat realistic with them, right?
Yeah, and it's very tough to get started because those first couple of weeks are going to be pretty miserable. And they're going to hurt, and you're going to feel sluggish, because most people have felt what it's like to be in great fitness and getting back to that point and then exceeding that previous best fitness is not easy, and it can take a lot of time. And if you're not patient and putting in the work week after week, you're not going to get there. And that's something that I struggle with all the time, because I just want instant gratification. Like, okay, I decided to start training. I should be killing my next workout.
Fit, yeah.
And I'm running 120-mile weeks, more than that. And it's been a month of that, and I'm still not anywhere close to where I want to be. And some could say, oh, that's because you're running too much. And that might be it. And hopefully once I start tapering a little bit, I'll start feeling great. But, I'm in these workouts, I'm struggling, I'm getting dropped, but at least I've gotten to a point where I'm okay with that, and I'm at least putting myself in a position
to take chances, yeah.
To do the workout.
Yeah.
Because not doing the workout you're never going to get better if you just shy away from workouts.
And on the other hand, I think if you feel good in training all the time, like, you're missing out. You're missing potential adaptation if you're crushing everything.
Totally agree. You can compare, you might have a staple workout that you do frequently, and it's really easy to compare times from one workout to the next. And it's a terrible approach because you don't know what other factors were in play. And even if you're comparing against another athlete, you could do the same 5-mile tempo on the same exact loop, but they could be coming off of 3 days of rest, and you could be coming off of a race week and a hard long run and all of those other factors, or you broke up with your girlfriend the night before, and all these other factors rarely get accounted for in the workout. It's not on Strava like you can say, oh yeah, I had 3 straight bad nights of sleep and relationship issues, and you can't include all those other
That's what
factors.
Twitter's for.
Yeah.
What is it about Western States that has you continuing to come back?
It was the first interest of mine in trail running. I, in 2015, went through a couple months of just getting really invested in ultra running podcasts. There weren't very many at the time, so it was a little bit easier than today, where it's a slightly more
Saturated
market. Yeah. But
everybody's got a podcast these days.
Everyone does. But I saw a couple of my peers in the San Francisco area who had found success. And
who were those athletes?
Alex Varner. I don't know if I knew Jorge that well at the time, or I think I knew Jorge Maravilla quite well. Brett Rivers. Just a lot of local runners who also competed in the local cross country scene, the local road scene where I was competing. And I typically fared fairly well against them. Varner and I feel like, had a pretty good record, although I think it was about 50-50 wins, losses. But I saw how well he was doing. I was like, maybe I can do this, and naively assumed that whatever you can do on the roads translates directly to trails. And it took a lot of struggling before I've kind of figured it out. But I had been listening to these podcasts. It sounded like Western States was the big deal, and I wanted to focus on that. So all of my goal for 2016 was trying to qualify for that one race. And fortunately, mostly to do with the help of David Roach, who took me under his wing after I barely outkicked his wife at a way too cool 50K. And I realized, well, first, okay, there's nothing bad about losing to a chick in ultras because they're pretty damn good.
Yeah,
it happens a lot. So every time I finish F1, I'm very thrilled. But yeah, David kind of showed me what was required to be good at trail running and how important it was to not necessarily translate over your marathon training, because it is a completely different beast. And ever since that first experience, at Western States, I had so many highs and lows during the race, and fortunately ended with a high that I was excited to see how I could improve, but also the sadistic part of me wanted to just go through those low points again and suffer. And so 2017, tried it again. Unfortunately, did not requalify in 2018. And so this is kind of my third attempt, and I'm going to keep on trying until I feel like I really knocked it out of the park. And I don't think that necessarily means winning the race. Obviously, that'd be a nice way to end a go at a specific race, but I think I will know at the start of the race that I've prepared as well as I could, and I'll know by the end if I kind of gave it my all. And again, even doing that, it'll be hard to walk away, but it's certainly the most meaningful race of any, and it's a really awesome opportunity to run against the best athletes in the U.S. as well as a couple international folks. And I still feel like it's the Super Bowl of our sport. I think some pundits would say Mont Blanc might be taking over the reins, but Western States certainly caters a little bit more to my road background. Although I want to set the record straight. People say how runnable and flat Western States is. 17,000 feet is still no joke. And I realize everyone seems to be chasing the most possible vert in a race, but compared to the Boston Marathon, which has about, 500 feet of climbing, maybe less.
Yeah.
It's pretty significant. So I don't want people to get the wrong impression who may be new to the ultra scene, but it's still a pretty fantastic accomplishment.
And it's hot. That's the other variable. And cold.
It's hot, cold, snow. We're going to have everything this year, and that's exciting.
Cool. What are you thinking about on the start line?
Man, I need to pee.
You ever peed yourself during a race?
Absolutely. But at the start of a race, the last 10 minutes, I'll probably go to the bathroom 3 times because I'm just like, I need to get every single ounce out. You're also like extremely hydrated. Generally have coffee flowing through your system. So that's helping move things along, and the nerves, that's a combination of everything. So that's typically the first thing on my mind. Then the second thing is, are my laces tight enough? I generally retie them multiple times, so I don't even bother like double knotting when I tie them the first time. And then you usually have a moment of peace during the national anthem or what have you, where you're just relieved that it's about to start. Because as soon as the gun goes off, all of that kind of goes to the back burner, and you're now focused on climbing a 3,000 foot climb to
5
start
miles.
the race.
Yeah.
So I think the biggest relief is hearing the gun or shotgun or whatever is at the start, because you can't do anything more at that point. And kind of the first time that you wake up during the race, you're at mile 30 and you're like, okay, that's already a marathon. That's a pretty good start. But it's a fun journey, and it's kind of intimidating just to think about how long it's going to be.
Have you spectated Western States?
I'd consider 2017 a spectator year. I came through Forest Hill in really good shape. I think I had just moved into 4th place.
Forest Hill is the 100K.
Yeah. It's like 62 miles, and took off from there. It's the hottest part of the day, but at that point, you've gone through most of the bad climbs. You're heading downhill towards the river, about to cool off there, and within 2 miles, something snapped and I couldn't run anymore. And to this day, I don't know what exactly happened, but I had to walk the last 35 miles. A lot of doubt, a lot of uncertainty, a lot of attempts to drop out. But a good opportunity to spectate. I got to see the women's race. I got to see the battle for the men's top 10. So before it went dark on me. So if anything, the lesson learned is be prepared for everything. And like, I didn't have a headlamp with me, which ended up almost being dangerous. But yeah, I think some of these races are right when they have these compulsory lists, mandatory gear that you need to bring along, because you really don't know what's going to happen out there. And I don't think states, you're not likely to run into a massive thunderstorm on top of a mountain, but certainly anything can happen within a 10-mile stretch. And I experienced that for sure.
Do you plan for those negative variables? Like, do you have if this happens, then I will do this? Or do you sort of deal with it as it comes?
Yeah.
Because I know a lot of people think about the worst things that can happen, and so that when they happen, you know what to do. Is that your approach, or is it sort of like let's see how the cards unfold?
I give my crew a pretty standard list of what to have available to me at each aid station and what I'm expecting to use. And I hope that list is large enough that we can kind of change on the fly, pull an audible, do what we need to based on what is required. So, you don't often think, oh, I'll need an extra pair of shoes, or I'll want to change shoes at a certain point. And just having the shoes available so you have that flexibility is nice. If you kind of forget to do that, it's an extra thing that your crew needs to haul, but having it available is nice. But it's very tough to anticipate what's going to happen out there. And even if you think you have everything accounted for, like, I guess this is something that's common enough that maybe I should have a plan for, but what happens if I find a bear in the middle of the course? Like, what am I supposed to do at that point? Or what happens if I see my teammate on the side of the course? Do I stop and help him out? Do I go to get help? Do I keep running my own race? Like, what do you do in those scenarios? And I hope that I have enough experience that I'll have the clarity to not panic and make the right decision. And I think that's probably the most important thing. I remember the first time I did a trail race, every single aid station I was racing out of and trying to catch up to the guy who had been more efficient or had a vest on, hydration vest, so he didn't need to refuel. And I was so stressed about maintaining my position and staying competitive. And that's just not the way I approach it. And it's because I'm patient, and it's because I know that the race isn't won in tens of seconds. It's won in minutes. And those minutes come from correctly pacing, running within yourself, not allowing your heart rate to spike. And that just means consistent, patient running. The same race 2 years later, I fell at about mile 15, completely tore up my knees, scraped my hands, ripped off my bib, and I was in a very low negative state. And I could have either given up at that point, done something crazy to try to catch up to the guys who I was running with, but instead I kind of threw out a couple F-bombs, which needed to happen, and kept going at my pace, knowing that it would take a couple miles to regroup, but I would get there.
Cool. So you mentioned teammates, and you run for Nike Trail. You've been with them for a couple of years. What's the relationship you have with both the teammates and Nike Trail in terms of their growth in the sport, and how do you feel as a sponsored athlete in terms of like, I must do this for the sponsor, things like that?
Well, first I want to commend myself that I haven't fidgeted more. I usually have to tap something, so I think you're not getting a ton of background noise, so I feel pretty proud of that.
There's an app for that anyways.
That's a good way to deflect the question. Next question. I am incredibly grateful for being sponsored. I do not think I anticipated when I left college that I would wait 10 years before I signed my first pro contract with Nike of all companies. So the thrill of signing a contract has not gone away. And that is incredibly exciting, but it's also a little scary because I do feel like there's some expectations placed on me, not necessarily by Nike themselves, but by wearing that jersey. So similar to running in a Stanford jersey at a meet, you feel this pressure to perform, and you see a guy from a small D3 school running up on you, and he just wants to outkick that Stanford guy, and there's pressure to hold up the honor and respect that that team has deserved. And when you're running in a kit, you see a pro at the start line, you're expecting them to do something magical. And I've run a lot of races that haven't been magical, and part of me has to be okay with that. And if I was afraid to show up to any race, then I'm never going to improve and get through the low points. And if anything, it gives me an opportunity to really relish the good moments, because I've had races that I've struggled at, and people have seen that and shown vulnerability. So when you see an athlete who always wins and has a perfect ultra sign up ranking and never seems to have any issues, it's hard to empathize with them and even believe that that's possible. But when you see somebody who goes from winning big races, finishing top 10 at Western States, and then finishing 15th at Sean O'Brien, 3 hours behind Courtney Dauwalter, and struggling and running hours off of personal bests and dropping out of Javelina, I think it makes the athlete more approachable. It also makes it tough for these brands, because they're like, how are we going to market this angle? He's an out of shape runner. So,
but I think that's the point, the part that makes it more accessible for an amateur. And I think that's the part that brings additional value compared to a runner that just wins everything. I think 10 years ago, you could be an athlete that wins everything, and you're more valuable because you win everything. I think in today's day and age, if you win something sometime at some point, but you're personable and you're engaging with the community, I'd rather follow athlete 2 over the athlete that wins everything, not 10 times out of 10.
Yeah, I'd hope so too. And I think it gives me a different perspective on racing, where I rarely have that much pressure on myself, but I also run a much more conservative race than a lot of my peers. And I've gotten some flack for that, but I also believe that it is the best approach that I can do at these races. Part of it is mental, where if I go out hard from the gun, it's really hard for me to grasp being in this much pain for that long of a period of time, which is something that I have figured out in marathons. So I'm not sure why that hasn't translated yet. But the other thing is, there's just an amazing amount of momentum you get from passing other runners and chasing runners down. And I also just feel like it's a smart way to run. If you look at most ultra races, the athlete who can run as evenly as possible, or even negative split, is typically the athlete who's going to win. And I certainly don't negative split many races, but keeping that second half pace as close as possible to the first half can make a monumental difference. If you go from running 8-minute pace to 9-minute pace versus 7:30 to 10:30, like you're making up a ton more time in that second half. And it's really hard to hear that the guy that you want to beat is 15 minutes ahead of you, 10 miles into a race, but you have to employ that patience and really run within yourself and have confidence that either they're going to have a really good day and you don't have a chance to beat them, or you're going to work into the race and get to where you want to be by the end.
Cool. What scares you? Whether it's running or just in life. I find that question fascinating for someone like yourself who does these things that like most people can't do or won't do.
The scariest thing for me right now is not Western States, the race itself. It's not having a similar blow up as last time. The scariest thing is showing up to the race not feeling prepared. And there have been many races in the past where I have felt underprepared. Some of them I've chosen to run. Some of them I've chosen to eat the travel costs, the $200 that United charges so that you can change your flight, which makes no sense when the flight's often less than that. And I've eaten those costs and felt a lot better for not having to suffer through a race where I'm underprepared. But Western States is an important enough race to me that I'm going to run it regardless. And you can't fake your way through a 100-miler. So the idea of showing up and not feeling confident is very frightening to me. And the idea of executing my workouts perfectly, my long runs perfectly, I know that's not going to happen. It's not going to be perfect, but I need to get 90% of that done. And if I don't show up to the line feeling prepared, that means that something went wrong during the process. And that's scary to me. And it's hard to believe right now when I'm hitting everything perfectly, but get a week closer to the race, get a little bit more stress in your life, start sleeping a little more poorly, start having a harder time waking up and getting in that morning run. Anything can really happen. And so the next month is really about, I want to make sure that I'm pushing myself, but more importantly, I don't want to burn out to the point where I can't execute anymore and I show up underprepared or not excited to race.
What gets you out the door in the morning? What gets you really excited to get your day started?
One, knowing that I have a 100-miler coming up, but I think more importantly this year than any other year is that I have a massive crew of folks coming with me. My family's coming out, a lot of close friends from San Francisco, and I really don't want to let them down either. Mm-hmm. A lot of people are investing a lot of time in me, and I feel like when I show up to a race with an audience supporting me, and it's not just spectating, crewing is a lot more, and crewing at 100-miler is a lot more than even showing up to a marathon. I don't take that for granted, and I respect their time, and I want to give it my best to show them what's possible. And I have a lot of unfinished business, so that makes it easy to think about. And especially when you see other athletes in the sport really nailing it, they're going to be fit at the start line. It definitely inspires you to do a little bit more because you're like, I wonder what my competitor is doing today. Probably an extra interval. Let's get after it.
Or maybe they're napping instead of podcasting. Perhaps maybe this was a bad decision.
Maybe they're out on the trails right now.
Maybe they're putting in work while you're sitting here. Yeah. How do you feel about balance?
I think it's important, but it depends on how you define it for yourself. Like I said, almost everything I'm doing right now is somewhat related to running, but I am also finding some time to be social. I think while this is my career right now, I still want to make sure that I'm enjoying it. I chose to do this, and I left an office job not to chase money and actually lose quite a bit of compensation, but because I loved the sport. And if I'm not loving it or it's impacting other aspects of my life, then it no longer is worth it. And maybe I'll be a little bit sharper if I don't have 3 beers on a Friday afternoon, a happy hour, and yeah, maybe I shouldn't stay out till 11 at a crazy baptism playing charades with the family. But I think it's important to step back and realize it's just running.
Yeah.
And if I'm not a happy individual, then I'm not going to be able to execute anything on the trails, and sacrificing a little bit of sleep, a little bit of focus is certainly worth it. And I fortunately never feel guilt associated with doing those other things. And I think that's very important. If you're doing them, but every time you do them, it makes you feel worse about yourself and regret it, then that's not balance.
For sure. Do you do any mental training or reading or listening to podcasts about mental conditioning?
No. In short, no.
All right.
I think the amount of time that I spend on a treadmill is mental conditioning enough. Once you hit that 3-hour mark on a treadmill, I feel like that takes about as much will and determination as
You run on treadmills here in Boulder?
Last Monday.
I feel like that should be an offense in this town.
Last Monday, I think I put in 60 miles last week on a treadmill. So
Wow.
Had a 50K on Monday because it was raining and cold, and wasn't super inspired to get outside, and certainly wasn't going to be able to get to the trails. I knew this was the only way I was going to get it done, and felt really determined that day, and surprisingly went by pretty quickly. But yeah, if you can survive even an hour on the treadmill, I feel like that's more strength and willpower than pretty much anything.
What did you do to make that 50K go?
Watched a lot of ESPN. I learned a lot about
You see top 10
the Lakers
a dozen times.
Watched the same top 10 highlights at least.
It didn't change?
2 times. Did not change. I was really hoping to catch Jeopardy because I really want to watch this guy.
Yeah, he seems to be crushing it.
And he's on this streak, but I always seem to miss the timing for that. But
Cool. Where can people find you on social media?
Chris Mocko. I think I'm one of the few Chris Mockos on social media. Mocko. I think YouTube's probably the best place to start. Instagram and Twitter, I'm active, but I feel like YouTube is where I invest the majority of my time. So the Mocko Show is where you want to go for that, and would love a couple new subscribers.
There we go. Well, thanks for taking the time, and we'll see you out there.
Thank you very much. Take care, folks.
That's it for today's episode. Like many long runs, it's sad when it has to end. I hope you join in next week on For the Long Run, and in the meantime, happy trails. If you've enjoyed this episode, it would mean a lot to me if you shared it so that others can find it and enjoy it too.